The steady drumming of rain against the window pane had been Alara's constant companion for the last 3 hours, a rhythmic lullaby that both soothed and sharpened her senses. Now, as the taxi crunched to a halt on the gravel drive, the sound intensified, mingling with the whisper of wind through ancient pines. She peered through the misted glass, the silhouette of Blackwood Manor rising like a myth against the bruised twilight sky. It was exactly as she remembered from the photographs, imposing, elegant, and cloaked in a solitude that both beckoned and challenged her. She paid the driver, her fingers brushing the damp leather of her purse, a nervous flutter in her chest. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and pine needles, a primal scent that immediately grounded her. A soft click announced the taxi driving away, leaving her utterly alone on the vast stone porch, save for the old oak door, dark and studded with wrought iron. Before she could even reach for the knocker, the door swung inward. Julian stood framed in the warm light of the foyer, a quiet presence that seemed to fill the space. His hair, dark as the midnight sky, was slightly tousled, as if he'd just run a hand through it. He wore a charcoal cashmere sweater that clung to his broad shoulders and dark trousers. His eyes, the color of aged whiskey, met hers, and a slow, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It wasn't a wide, boisterous grin, but a subtle softening that held a wealth of welcome and something deeper, something that made Alara's breath catch. "Alara," he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble that seemed perfectly suited to the grand, quiet house and the storm outside. "You made it." "Julian," she replied, her own voice a little breathy, surprised by the immediate jolt of recognition and attraction. It had been 5 years. 5 years since that one unforgettable summer, a brief, intense comet streaking across their separate lives. She'd tried to forget him, or at least compartmentalize him, but seeing him now, the memory was a fresh wound, a sweet ache. He stepped aside, gesturing her in. "Come in, out of the rain, you must be frozen." She moved past him, a subtle current of warmth emanating from his proximity. The foyer was vast, with polished dark wood floors, and a grand staircase curving upwards. A fire crackled merrily in a stone hearth to her left, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air inside was rich, with the scent of burning logs, old books, and something else, something uniquely him. A subtle spice, and a hint of old leather. "It's beautiful, Julian. Even more so than the pictures." She turned, meeting his gaze again, and this time the smile that played on his lips was more pronounced, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "It has its charms. Let me take your bag." He reached for the worn leather duffel slung over her shoulder, his fingers brushing hers, a spark of contact that felt like a tiny electric shock. She pulled her hand back quickly, a blush rising to her cheeks. He didn't comment, merely took the bag, his movements fluid and strong. "Thank you." She felt suddenly self-conscious, acutely aware of her damp coat, the few stray strands of hair that had escaped her bun. "I probably look a fright." He chuckled, a low, warm sound. "On the contrary, you look exactly as I remember. And even better." His gaze lingered for a moment, tracing the curve of her jaw, the slight flush in her cheeks, before he turned to place her bag near the stairs. "Let's get you warm. Tea? Or something stronger?" "Tea would be lovely, thank you." She watched him, appreciating the quiet grace of his movements. He seemed to belong in this house, a part of its ancient charm. "It's been a long journey." He led her into a large drawing room off the foyer. The fire here was even grander, throwing a golden glow over plush velvet armchairs and shelves lined with books. A low coffee table held an array of delicate teacups and a silver tray. "Sit," he invited, gesturing to a deep armchair upholstered in forest green. "I'll just put the kettle on. I assumed you'd want something hot after your travels." She sank into the cushions, the softness a welcome relief after hours of travel. The rain outside seemed to intensify, a comforting roar now that she was warm and safe. She watched Julian disappear into what she presumed was the kitchen, a sense of unreality settling over her. She was here. At Blackwood Manor. With Julian. Why had she come? A vague invitation, a shared memory of a summer that had ended too abruptly, too quietly. He'd sent a brief email, mentioning a retreat, a place to find inspiration, knowing she was a writer. And she, feeling adrift, had impulsively accepted. Now, she wondered if it was wisdom or folly that had led her to his door. He returned a few minutes later, carrying a steaming pot of Earl Grey and a plate of shortbread biscuits. The aroma of citrus and bergamot filled the air, mingling with the wood smoke. He set them down on the coffee table, then settled into the armchair opposite her, stretching his long legs towards the fire. "Milk? Sugar?" he asked, his voice soft, almost a murmur against the storm's crescendo. "Just a little milk, please." Their hands brushed again as he passed her the cup, a brief, lingering touch that sent a shiver down her spine. The porcelain was warm against her fingers. She took a sip, the heat and flavor a balm to her weary soul. "Thank you, Julian. This is perfect." He nodded, watching her over the rim of his own cup. "I'm glad you came, Alara." The simple statement hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. She felt her cheeks flush again. "It's beautiful here, so peaceful." "It is. And it's good for the soul, I find. Especially when the world outside gets too loud." He paused, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "You seem to be needing some peace." She looked at him, surprised by his perceptiveness. "How did you know?" He finally met her eyes, a knowing glint in their depth. "We've known each other for a summer, Lara. And some people, some connections, they don't fade, no matter the distance or time. I sensed it in your reply, in the quiet way you accepted." A knot tightened in her stomach, a mixture of apprehension and a thrilling sense of being truly seen. "You always were perceptive." He merely smiled, a faint, enigmatic curve of his lips. "And you, Alara, always wore your heart a little too close to the surface for your own good. It's one of the things I always admired about you." The compliment, delivered so casually, sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire. She looked away, focusing on the intricate pattern of the Persian rug. "I suppose that makes me predictable." "Never predictable," he countered softly. "Just, transparently beautiful." The words, whispered like a secret, felt like a caress. She felt a heat spread across her chest, a pulse quickening in her throat. The silence stretched, filled only by the crackle of the fire and the relentless drumming of the rain. It wasn't an awkward silence, but one charged with an electric tension, a silent conversation unfolding between them. He broke it, his voice a little lighter. "So, what brings you to the brink of the world, Alara? Still chasing words?" She finally met his gaze, a genuine smile gracing her lips. "Always, though lately the words have been a little elusive. I thought a change of scenery might shake them loose. I hope Blackwood can provide that." He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, his posture relaxed yet attentive. "This place has a way of coaxing out hidden things." "Hidden things?" she echoed, a playful challenge in her tone. "Indeed. Long-forgotten memories, desires you didn't know you possessed, stories waiting to be told." His gaze was intense, making her feel as though he was looking not just at her, but into her. The conversation flowed easily after that, touching on their lives since that summer, the paths they'd taken, the small triumphs and quiet disappointments. They talked about books, about art, about the elusive nature of inspiration. The storm raged outside, making their sanctuary by the fire feel even more intimate, more profoundly isolated. As the hours drifted by, the light outside faded into an impenetrable velvet black. Julian rose to light a few lamps, casting soft pools of light around the room, deepening the shadows. The atmosphere grew heavier, thicker with unspoken longing. "Are you hungry, Alara?" he asked, turning from a lamp, his face illuminated by its soft glow, making the planes of his cheeks and jaw seem starker, more defined. "A little, yes," she admitted. "But please don't go to any trouble." He smiled, a gentle, reassuring gesture. "No trouble at all. I made a stew earlier. It's warming on the stove, and there's some good wine." She followed him into a spacious, old-fashioned kitchen, replete with a large wooden island and copper pots hanging from racks. The scent of rosemary and slow-cooked meat filled the air. He moved with an easy competence, ladling the rich stew into 2 earthenware bowls. They ate at a small round table in a bay window, overlooking the now pitch-black garden, the only light coming from the kitchen and the soft glow of the fireplace in the drawing room. The wine, a deep claret, was smooth and comforting. "This is delicious, Julian," she murmured, savoring a spoonful of the tender meat and vegetables. "You're a truly excellent cook." "A necessity of solitude," he replied, a hint of self-deprecation in his voice. But his eyes sparkled with pleasure at her compliment. "Though I admit it's better shared." Their gazes met across the flickering candlelight of the table. The rain was still falling, a relentless curtain of sound, but it no longer felt threatening. It felt encompassing, like the world outside had been deliberately shut away, leaving only the 2 of them in this pocket of warmth and light. They talked less during dinner, the silence punctuated by the clinking of cutlery, the occasional sip of wine. The air thrummed with a different kind of energy now, an almost palpable awareness of each other. Ilara found herself studying him, noticing the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the strong line of his throat as he swallowed, the subtle flecks of muscle beneath the cashmere of his sweater. He wasn't overtly handsome in a conventional way, but there was an intensity, a depth to him that was far more captivating. When they had finished, he cleared the table with quiet efficiency. "Shall we have another glass of wine by the fire?" "I'd like that very much," she said, her voice a little softer than she intended. Back in the drawing room, the fire had burned down to a bed of glowing embers. Julian added a fresh log, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney and a renewed burst of warmth into the room. He poured them more wine, and they settled back into their armchairs. The conversation grew more intimate, more personal. They spoke of fears, of dreams, of the messy complexities of life. Ilara found herself sharing things she hadn't voiced to anyone in years, secrets that felt safe in the soft glow of the fire and the quiet presence of Julian. He listened with an intensity that made her feel cherished, utterly heard. "I sometimes wonder," she began, swirling the wine in her glass, "if we ever truly escape our pasts, or if they just shape us into something new." Julian reached out, his long fingers gently taking her hand, which rested on the arm of her chair. His touch was warm, firm, and sent a delicious tremor through her. "They shape us, Ilara, but they don't define us. We choose what we carry forward and what we leave behind." His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a feather-light touch that sent goosebumps racing up her arm. Her breath hitched. She didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her hand slightly, her fingers curling around his, intertwining them. The simple intimacy of the gesture was electrifying. She looked into his eyes and saw a reflection of her own longing, her own vulnerability. "What do you carry forward, Julian?" she whispered, the question barely audible above the wind rattling the old house. His gaze dropped to their joined hands, then back to her eyes. Moments of profound beauty. Unforgettable connections. Things that make life worth living. His thumb continued its slow, hypnotic rhythm on her skin. "And you, Ilara, were one of those moments, one of those connections." The confession, so openly spoken, felt like a physical touch, a warmth spreading through her veins. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She felt a magnetic pull, an irresistible urge to lean closer, to bridge the small distance between them. He seemed to sense it, because he slowly, deliberately, began to rise from his chair. She watched him, her eyes wide, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. He moved with a quiet grace, then knelt beside her armchair, so he was level with her. His other hand came up, gently cupping her jaw, his thumb tracing the soft curve of her cheekbone. His touch was exquisitely tender, sending shivers through her. Her lips parted slightly, a soft gasp escaping her. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice a low, husky whisper that vibrated through her very bones. His whiskey-colored eyes held hers captive, a swirling vortex of desire and tenderness. "I've thought about this moment for 5 years." She couldn't speak, could only meet his intense gaze, her own eyes mirroring the silent plea, the raw longing that filled the room. The scent of him, wood smoke, spice, and something uniquely masculine, enveloped her, intoxicating her. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, to stop him. But she didn't. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed as his breath, warm and sweet with wine, ghosted across her lips. Then, his mouth was on hers. It was a slow, tender kiss, a gentle exploration, as if tasting something precious and long-awaited. His lips were soft, warm, a perfect fit against hers. She felt a tidal wave of emotion crash over her. Relief, joy, a fierce, aching desire. Her fingers tightened around his, clinging to the anchor he provided in this swirling storm of sensation. The kiss deepened, slowly, exquisitely. His hand moved from her jaw, sliding into her hair, cupping the back of her head, drawing her closer still. She responded instinctively, her free hand coming up to rest on his shoulder, her fingers tangling in the cashmere of his sweater, feeling the hard muscle beneath. He tasted of wine and warmth and something utterly intoxicating. It wasn't a demanding kiss, but one that promised depths, that spoke of years of unspoken yearning. He kissed her with a tender passion that made her knees weak, her body tremble. She felt herself leaning into him, drawn by an invisible force, her body aching for closer contact. His other hand, still holding hers, moved to her waist, pulling her gently from the armchair, until she was kneeling on the rug before him, their bodies almost touching. The firelight danced over their faces, painting them in hues of golden shadow. The rain outside continued its relentless symphony, a backdrop to the quiet roar in her ears. Every nerve ending in her body was alive, humming with exquisite sensation. He broke the kiss for a moment, just barely, his forehead resting against hers. Their breaths mingled, ragged and shallow. "You have no idea," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "how long I've wanted to do that." Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his. They were dark, swimming with a raw hunger that mirrored her own. "I think I might," she whispered back, her voice husky, barely a sound. He kissed her again, this time with more urgency, more hunger. His lips moved expertly over hers, tasting, teasing, drawing a soft moan from deep within her throat. Her fingers fisted in his sweater, holding on as if her life depended on it. His hand that had been cradling her head now drifted lower, tracing the delicate curve of her neck, then settling at the nape, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin there. The other hand, still at her waist, began to move, slowly, sensuously, upward along her side, over the soft fabric of her top, until it reached her ribs, just beneath her breast. He didn't touch her breast directly, but the exquisite proximity was enough to send a jolt of pure pleasure through her. She arched into his touch, a silent invitation, a desperate plea. The world outside, the storm, the old house, all faded away, leaving only the two of them, locked in this potent embrace by the fire. He seemed to understand, because his hand moved higher, his fingers lightly brushing the swell of her breast through the thin fabric. A soft, teasing touch that made her gasp. Her head fell back slightly, exposing the delicate line of her throat. "Ilara," he breathed, his lips moving from hers, trailing a path of fire along her jaw, down her neck. His stubble grazed her skin, a delicious friction. She shivered, not from cold, but from an overwhelming wave of pleasure. His lips found the hollow of her throat, lingered there, then moved lower, to the pulse beating wildly at the base of her neck. She tangled her fingers deeper into his hair, holding him close, wanting to feel every inch of him against her. He lifted his head again, his eyes dark with desire. "Are you cold, my love?" he asked, his voice a low growl, his gaze searching hers. "No," she whispered, shaking her head, her voice barely there. "Never." He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips. "Good." He rose slowly, pulling her up with him, until they were standing, swaying slightly in front of the fire, their bodies pressed intimately together. She could feel the hard planes of his chest, the warmth of his skin through the cashmere. The scent of him was intoxicating, a heady mix of earth and spice, and something uniquely him. He kept one arm around her waist, holding her close, while his other hand gently tugged at the pins in her hair. One by one, they fell to the floor. Little metallic whispers against the rug, until her heavy mass of auburn hair tumbled down around her shoulders, a cascade of soft waves. He threaded his fingers through it, burying his face in the fragrant strands. "Beautiful," he murmured against her ear, his lips brushing her lobe, sending another shiver through her. "Always so beautiful." She leaned into his embrace, her head resting against his shoulder, her eyes closed. She felt safe, cherished, utterly desired. The storm outside seemed to embrace them, a cocoon of sound and intimacy. "Let's get you truly warm," he said, his voice a low rumble against her ear. He gently guided her towards the grand staircase. The polished wood gleamed in the soft lamplight. Each step creaked softly under their combined weight as they ascended, a symphony of old house sounds. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't need to. The unspoken understanding between them was a tangible thing, a silken thread drawing them forward. Her hand remained clasped in his, their fingers intertwined, a constant connection. They reached the landing, where another soft lamp cast a golden glow. Julian led her down a long corridor, lined with dark wood paneling and old paintings. The air here was cooler, quieter. At the very end, he stopped before a heavy oak door. He pushed it open, revealing a room bathed in the soft ethereal glow of moonlight filtering through a large window. There was no fire here, but the room felt warm, inviting. A grand four-poster bed, draped in rich fabrics, dominated the space. A thick plush rug covered the floor. "This is your room," he said, his voice a little strained, his gaze lingering on her. "I thought you might appreciate the quiet and the view." She stepped inside, her eyes sweeping over the room. It was elegant, luxurious, yet understated. A large armchair sat in a corner, next to a small table with a single lamp. Bookshelves lined one wall. But it was the bed that drew her gaze. Its crisp white linens and soft throws an inviting canvas. He followed her in, closing the door softly behind him. The click of the latch echoed in the sudden quiet, a sound that sealed them in. He moved to the window, pulling back the heavy velvet curtains, revealing a breathtaking view of the rain-swept forest, silvered by the moonlight. The world outside was a dreamscape of shadows and mist. "It's magnificent, Julian," she whispered, turning to him. He stood by the window, silhouetted against the pale light, his figure strong and compelling. He turned from the window, his gaze meeting hers across the room. The distance between them felt vast, yet charged with an unbearable tension. "You look tired, Alara," he said, his voice soft, gentle. "It's been a long day." She nodded, a wave of exhaustion suddenly washing over her. But it was a pleasant exhaustion, mingled with a vibrant, restless energy. He walked towards her, his movements slow, deliberate. When he reached her, he paused, his hands gently framing her face. His thumbs stroked her cheekbones, his touch feather-light. His eyes, dark as midnight, held hers. "Let me help you," he murmured, his voice a silken caress. His fingers moved to the buttons of her damp coat, slowly, carefully, undoing each one. The fabric fell away, revealing the simple silk blouse she wore beneath. He slipped the coat from her shoulders, letting it fall to the floor in a soft heap. Then his fingers moved to the small pearl buttons of her blouse. She watched him, mesmerized, her breath catching in her throat. Each button, slowly unfastened, felt like a deliberate act, a silent promise. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet room. When the last button was undone, he gently pushed the silk fabric open, revealing the delicate lace camisole she wore beneath. His eyes lingered on the soft swell of her breasts, the shadowed valley between them, a silent appreciation that sent a hot flush through her. "Julian," she whispered, her voice a plea, a question. "Shh," he murmured, his eyes still locked with hers. "Just breathe, Alara." He pulled the blouse from her shoulders, letting it join her coat on the floor. Now, she stood before him in her camisole and skirt, feeling exquisitely vulnerable, utterly exposed, yet utterly safe. His hands, warm and firm, moved to her waist, his thumbs tracing the line of her hips. He pulled her gently closer, until their bodies were almost touching. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, the subtle scent of his skin. "You are even more beautiful than I remember," he whispered, his gaze dropping to her lips, then back to her eyes. She leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. The desire in his eyes was a mirror of her own, a silent language they both understood. "Julian," she said again, her voice barely a breath. I don't know what to say." He smiled, a slow, tender smile that reached his eyes. "You don't have to say anything, Ilara, not tonight, just feel." He leaned down, slowly, giving her ample time to resist, to step away. But she stood her ground, her body trembling with anticipation. His lips met hers again, this time, with a soft, lingering tenderness that promised more. It was a kiss that spoke of patience, of reverence, of a deep and abiding desire. His hands moved from her waist, sliding upwards, over her ribs, until they cupped her face again, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. The kiss deepened, a slow, intoxicating dance of lips and tongues. She felt herself melt into him, her body pliant and responsive against his. When they finally broke apart, it was only by inches. Their foreheads rested against each other, their breaths mingling. The world outside was still a symphony of rain and wind, but in this room, there was only the soft glow of moonlight, the scent of their mingled bodies, and the silent, pulsing beat of their shared desire. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his touch exquisitely gentle. "Let's make this night unforgettable, Ilara," he whispered, his voice a low, husky promise. A story whispered only between us. And then, his lips found hers once more, a deeper, more passionate kiss that left no doubt about the night that lay ahead. His lips found hers once more, a deeper, more passionate kiss that left no doubt about the night that lay ahead. It was a kiss that tasted of lingering wine and raw, unbridled desire, a slow descent into a shared hunger that resonated deep within Ilara's very bones. Her hands, which had been resting lightly on his shoulders, now threaded into the silken strands of his hair, pulling him closer, an unspoken plea for more. The faint sound of the storm outside, the lashing rain and whistling wind, seemed to recede, becoming a distant hum, a mere backdrop to the tempest brewing within the confines of this room, within the confines of their embrace. His tongue traced the seam of her lips, a delicate, teasing probe that sent a shiver through her. She parted them, an instinctive invitation, and he accepted, his tongue dancing with hers in a rhythm that was both tentative and intensely sensual. It was a language spoken only by touch, a conversation of sighs and soft moans that vibrated between their bodies, a silent symphony of mounting passion. His hands, which had been cradling her face with such tender reverence, now drifted lower, tracing the elegant line of her neck, then settling at the small of her back. He pressed her gently, exquisitely, against the hard plane of his chest, and she could feel the rapid beat of his heart against her own, a syncopated drum of desire. The thin silk of her nightgown, already clinging to her damp skin, felt like a mere suggestion, a teasing veil that promised more than it concealed. "Ilara," he breathed against her mouth, a sound that was less a word and more a vibration of pure longing, a husky caress that sent goosebumps rippling across her skin. His fingers began to move, slowly, deliberately, along her spine, sending sparks of sensation in their wake. Her breath hitched. She arched into his touch, a silent invitation to explore further, to delve deeper into the burgeoning intimacy between them. He broke the kiss, only to pepper a trail of feather-like kisses down her jawline, to the sensitive curve beneath her ear. "You are exquisite," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion, each word a caress, a promise of untold pleasure. His warm breath on her skin intensified the shivers. She tilted her head back, offering him more of her neck, her throat, a vulnerable surrender that thrilled them both. His hands continued their journey, sliding from her back to her hips, then slowly, deliberately, upwards, along her sides. The silk of her nightgown, which had felt like a second skin, now became an obstacle, a delicious barrier to be overcome. His fingers found the delicate lace trim, tracing it with an almost reverent touch. Elara gasped softly, as his thumb brushed the outer curve of her breast, a fleeting contact that left her yearning for more, a mere taste of the feast to come. "Let me," he whispered, his eyes dark and intense in the moonlight, meeting hers. There was a question in their depths, an unspoken request for permission, even as his body spoke of an undeniable, powerful need. Elara didn't need words. She simply nodded, her gaze locked with his, a silent understanding passing between them, a shared consent that transcended language. Her fingers still tangled in his hair, tightened momentarily before she released them, letting her hands drift down to his chest, feeling the taut muscle beneath the fine linen of his shirt. With a slow, deliberate grace, he reached behind her, his fingers finding the delicate buttons that fastened her nightgown. Each unfastening was a tiny, exquisite torture, a moment of anticipation drawn out to perfection. The cool air brushed against her skin as the fabric parted, one button at a time, revealing the smooth expanse of her back, then the graceful curve of her shoulders. As the gown loosened, he slipped his hands beneath the silk, pushing it gently from her shoulders, letting it pool around her waist. Her breasts, full and rising with each quickening breath, were now bared to the moonlight and to his gaze. He paused, his eyes lingering on them, a silent appreciation that made her nipples harden in response. A flush spread across her chest, a mixture of tantalizing shyness and exhilarating desire. "Beautiful," he breathed, his voice a reverent whisper thick with awe. He didn't rush to touch, but allowed his gaze to feast, making her feel utterly seen, utterly desired, utterly adored. It was a powerful, intoxicating feeling, making her feel like the most precious woman in the world. Then his hands were on her again, no longer tracing the fabric, but directly on her skin. His palms cupped her breasts, the warmth of his touch sending a jolt through her. His thumbs brushed lightly over her nipples, teasing them to an even greater peak of sensitivity. A soft moan escaped her lips, a pure, uninhibited sound of pleasure that surprised even herself. He leaned in, his lips finding the hollow of her throat again, then moving lower, trailing fire across her collarbone. "I've wanted to do this since the moment I saw you," he confessed, his voice thick with desire, a raw admission that thrilled her to her core. Elara's fingers found the buttons on his shirt, fumbling slightly in her eagerness. He chuckled softly, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated against her chest. He guided her hands, helping her unfasten the remaining buttons. The linen parted, revealing the broad expanse of his chest, dusted with dark, inviting hair. She gasped softly as her fingers brushed against the warm skin, feeling the tautness of his muscles, the strong, steady beat of his heart. He shrugged the shirt from his shoulders, letting it fall to the floor with a soft rustle, joining the discarded silk of her nightgown. Now, it was his turn to be bared to the moonlight, his powerful physique outlined in silver. Her gaze traveled over his broad shoulders, his defined arms, the flat plane of his stomach. A thrill, sharp and intoxicating, coursed through her, a delicious anticipation of what was to come. He pulled her closer again, her bare breasts pressing against the warm, hard expanse of his chest. The sensation was electrifying, skin on skin, heat meeting heat. She could feel the crisp hair of his chest against her sensitive nipples, a delicious friction that made her breath catch, a sweet ache blooming deep within her. His lips found hers once more, a kiss that was deeper, more urgent now, fueled by the raw desire that had been building between them, an unspoken crescendo of yearning. Her fingers splayed across his back, feeling the ripple of muscle beneath her touch. She pressed herself into him, wanting to be closer, wanting to feel every inch of him against her, to dissolve into him. He lifted her effortlessly, her legs instinctively wrapping around his waist. The sudden shift, the feeling of being held so completely, so powerfully, elicited another soft gasp from her. He carried her the few steps to the bed, the soft mattress yielding beneath them as he lowered her gently onto the cool sheets. The moonlight streamed through the window, painting the room in shades of silver and shadow. The storm outside had not abated, its wild symphony a counterpoint to the quiet intensity within. Elara lay back, gazing up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of anticipation and trust, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. He knelt beside the bed, his dark eyes burning into hers, a silent fire reflecting the passion that consumed them both. He reached out, his hand tracing the curve of her hip, then moving slowly, deliberately, down the length of her leg, over her thigh, her knee, her calf, until his fingers brushed her ankle. Each touch was a promise, a slow kindling of fire, igniting every nerve ending in its path. "You are a vision," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion, "more beautiful than any dream." She blushed, a warm tide spreading across her skin, a soft heat rising to her cheeks. "And you?" she managed, her voice a little shaky, a little breathless, "are more than I ever imagined." He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips that sent a fresh wave of heat through her, a delicious tremor that started deep within her core. He leaned down, his lips brushing hers again, a soft, lingering kiss that tasted of longing and unspoken desires, a promise of fulfillment. His hands returned to her thighs, gently parting them, his touch incredibly tender, incredibly knowing. Elara's breath hitched again, her body arching slightly in response, a silent plea for his touch. He leaned into her, his weight pressing her gently into the mattress. The hard ridge of his arousal pressed against her, a clear and undeniable declaration of his desire, a powerful presence that made her ache with anticipation. His lips moved from hers, trailing down her chin, her throat, to the pulse beating wildly at the base of her neck. "I want to taste every inch of you, Elara," he whispered, his voice a low growl, vibrating against her skin. "To know every secret curve, every delicate hollow." His words, hot and potent, sent a shiver of pure excitement through her. She felt herself opening to him, not just physically but emotionally, spiritually, a profound surrender. This wasn't just about physical release, it was about a profound connection, a shared vulnerability that promised a deeper intimacy. He continued his downward journey, his lips pressing soft kisses along her collarbone, then lower, to the swell of her breasts. He teased her nipples with his tongue, circling them, then drawing them gently into his mouth, suckling with a tender ferocity that made her cry out his name, a breathless sound of pure bliss. Her fingers clutched at his hair, holding him close, urging him deeper into this exquisite pleasure, wanting to lose herself completely in the sensations. Her hips began to move instinctively, an ancient rhythm asserting itself, a primal dance of desire that had been lying dormant, waiting for this moment. The world outside the room, the storm, the demands of life, all faded away, leaving only the two of them, entwined in a dance of pure sensation. He shifted, raising himself slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Look at you," he murmured, his gaze sweeping over her flushed body, "so radiant, so open to me." He reached down, his fingers gently parting the soft curls at the apex of her thighs. Elara gasped as his touch, warm and firm, found the exquisite sensitivity hidden there. He stroked her, slowly, deliberately, his thumb circling her clitoris, sending waves of pleasure radiating through her core. Her hips lifted from the bed, seeking the pressure, the delicious friction. She closed her eyes, her head falling back against the pillow, a soft moan escaping her lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure. "So wet, Elara," he whispered, his voice a husky caress. "So ready for me." Fingers delved deeper, finding her entrance, exploring the slick, welcoming warmth within. Each movement was deliberate, building the tension, drawing her closer to the precipice of release, pushing her further into the intoxicating haze of desire. She was writhing beneath his touch now, lost in a haze of sensation, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The scent of their arousal filled the air, a heady perfume that intensified the moment. The storm outside raged on, its wild energy mirroring the tempest building within her, a perfect harmony of chaos and passion. He leaned down again, his lips finding hers, claiming her mouth in a deep, consuming kiss, as his fingers continued their exquisite work. Her legs tightened around his waist, her body arching, pleading for more, for release. She could feel the delicious pressure building, a sweet agony that promised an even sweeter release, a crescendo of sensation that threatened to overwhelm her. He pulled back slightly, his eyes dark and knowing, searching hers. There was a question there, an unspoken request for permission, for readiness. Elara met his gaze, her eyes shining with unshed tears of pleasure, and nodded, a silent, desperate affirmation that spoke volumes. With a low groan, he shifted, positioning himself between her legs. She felt the warm, hard tip of him pressing against her entrance, a thrilling, aching pressure that made her body tremble. Her body opened to him, welcoming him, craving him, a silent plea for completion. He entered her slowly, deliberately, drawing out the exquisite sensation. Elara gasped, a sharp intake of breath as she felt him fill her, stretching her, completing her. It was a feeling of profound fullness, of perfect alignment, as if their bodies had been designed for this very moment. Their bodies, so long separate, now united in a timeless embrace. He paused, allowing them both to adjust, to savor the feeling of being intimately joined. Their eyes were locked, a silent communion passing between them, a shared understanding of the magnitude of this moment. The moonlight cast their intertwined bodies in a soft, ethereal glow, making them appear like figures in an ancient myth, timeless lovers caught in the throes of passion. Then, with a deep exhale, he began to move. A slow, rhythmic thrust that set her body ablaze. He moved with a masterful control, each stroke deep and deliberate, drawing gasps and moans from her. She met his rhythm, her hips rising to meet his, pulling him deeper, wanting more, wanting all of him. The bed springs creaked softly, a gentle counterpoint to their ragged breaths and soft cries. The storm outside seemed to join their symphony, the wind howling, the rain lashing against the window pane, a wild, passionate chorus accompanying their dance. He leaned down, his lips finding her ear. "Look at me, Elara," he whispered, his voice thick with desire, raw and potent. "Look at what we are doing." She opened her eyes, gazing up at him through a haze of pleasure. She saw the raw desire in his eyes, the passion etched on his face, and knew that her own face mirrored his. In that moment, there was no past, no future, only the exquisite, pounding present, a perfect, timeless bubble of sensation. He increased the pace, his movements becoming more urgent, more insistent. Her body responded without conscious thought, every nerve ending alive, every muscle tensing and releasing in a primal dance. The pleasure built, a spiraling vortex of sensation, drawing her deeper and deeper into its intoxicating embrace. Her nails lightly scraped his back, her legs tightened around his waist, urging him on. "More," she whimpered. "Please, more." He responded to her plea, his thrusts growing stronger, faster, driving them both closer and closer to the brink. The air grew thick with their mingled scents, their heat, their shared energy. The moonlight continued to pour over them, illuminating their joined bodies, the sweat glistening on their skin. He held her gaze, a silent testament to the intimacy of their connection. His eyes, dark and intense, seemed to pierce through her, seeing into her very soul. It was a moment of profound vulnerability and exhilarating power, a complete and utter surrender to the moment. The waves of pleasure began to crest, building to an unbearable intensity. Her body trembled, a delicious tremor that started deep within her core and spread outwards. She felt herself nearing the edge, hovering on the precipice of complete release, a sweet, agonizing anticipation. "Let go, Elara," he whispered, his voice ragged, his own body trembling with the effort of holding back, of savoring this exquisite journey with her. "Let go with me." And then she shattered. A gasp tore from her throat, a cry of pure, unadulterated pleasure, as her body convulsed around him, waves of exquisite sensation washing over her, through her, consuming her entirely. She felt herself dissolving, becoming one with the pleasure, one with him. He groaned, a deep, guttural sound, as her release spurred his own. With a final, powerful thrust, he poured himself into her, his body arching, his muscles tensing, his own cry mingling with hers as he found his release. For a long moment, they lay entwined, breathless, heartbeats slowly returning to a calmer rhythm. The storm outside, as if echoing their own spent energy, seemed to quiet slightly, the rain softening to a gentle patter, a soft sigh of contentment. He collapsed onto her, his weight a comforting presence, his head resting in the hollow of her neck. His breath, warm and even, tickled her skin. Her fingers, still tangled in his damp hair, slowly stroked his scalp, a gesture of profound tenderness and affection. The moonlight still streamed through the window, painting their bodies in shades of silver and shadow. The air was thick with the scent of their lovemaking, a potent, intoxicating aroma of sweat, musk, and spent desire. He stirred, lifting his head slightly, his eyes, still dark with passion, meeting hers. A soft smile played on his lips. "Unforgettable," he murmured, echoing his earlier promise, his voice husky with contentment, thick with satisfaction. Elara smiled back, a soft, radiant smile. She felt utterly sated, utterly cherished, utterly alive. Her body still thrummed with the lingering echoes of pleasure, a sweet, warm ache that settled deep in her bones, a gentle reminder of the magic they had just shared. He shifted, rolling onto his side, pulling her against him so that her back was pressed to his front. His arm went around her waist, pulling her close, spooning her body against his. He kissed the nape of her neck, a soft, lingering kiss that promised continued comfort and intimacy, a silent vow of connection. "Sleep now, my love," he whispered into her hair, his voice a balm to her senses, a soothing melody that lulled her. Rest. But even as he spoke the words, Elara knew that sleep was still a distant thought. Her body might be spent, but her mind was wide awake, replaying every exquisite moment, savoring every touch, every kiss, every shared breath. The night was far from over, and the story they were weaving together had only just begun. The quiet hum of the storm outside, the soft glow of the moonlight, and the comforting weight of his body against hers, all conspired to keep her in this perfect, suspended state of bliss. She closed her eyes, a contented sigh escaping her lips, ready for whatever the rest of this unforgettable night, and the many nights to come, would bring. His lips found hers again, a soft query, a gentle confirmation that he was just as ready. This kiss was different from the hurried, hungry ones that had led them here. It was slower, deeper, a languid dance of sensation that promised unhurried exploration. Her hands, which had been resting on his back, now drifted upwards, tracing the strong line of his shoulders, the corded muscle of his neck, before burying themselves in the soft thickness of his hair. She felt him shiver lightly beneath her touch, a tiny tremor that resonated deep within her own core. He shifted, rising slightly above her, supporting his weight on his elbows, his gaze locked with hers. The moonlight, now a little brighter as the storm's heaviest clouds began to disperse, cast silver across his features, highlighting the intensity in his eyes. There was a question there, an unspoken request, and a profound reverence that made her heart ache with a sweet tenderness. She reached up, her fingertips tracing the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight stubble that softened his masculine edge. "Yes," she whispered, the single word a breathy affirmation of everything she felt, everything she desired. A slow, breathtaking smile spread across his face, a private joy that made her entire being hum. He lowered his head, not to kiss her lips this time, but to press a trail of soft, open-mouthed kisses along her jawline, down her throat, lingering in the hollow of her collarbone. Each touch was a spark, igniting a trail of fire across her skin. She arched her back slightly, offering herself more fully to his ministrations, her fingers still tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. The scent of him, a warm, musky scent mingled with the clean, fresh tang of rain, filled her senses, intoxicating and utterly compelling. His hands, which had been resting gently on her waist, began to move. Slowly, deliberately, they slid upwards beneath the soft fabric of her shirt, brushing against the sensitive skin of her ribs, sending shivers through her. Her breath hitched as his fingertips grazed the side of her breast, a feather-light touch that promised so much more. She felt her nipples harden in anticipation, a delicious ache blooming deep within her. He paused, his lips still pressed to her skin, as if waiting for her permission, her signal to continue. She responded by pressing herself closer, a soft moan escaping her lips, urging him on without words. With a gentle sigh, he began to peel away the layers of their clothing. Her shirt was the first to go, carefully lifted over her head, revealing the delicate lace of her bra beneath. His eyes devoured the sight, a look of profound appreciation that made her feel beautiful, cherished. Then, with a practiced ease that bespoke a sensual grace, he unhooked her bra, letting it fall away to reveal the full, inviting curve of her breasts. A soft gasp escaped her as he leaned down, his warm breath ghosting over her, before his lips finally found their target. The world narrowed to the exquisite sensation of his mouth on her skin. He teased, he suckled, he nibbled, drawing forth sensations that reverberated through her very core. She tangled her fingers in his hair once more, holding him to her, her hips beginning a slow, unconscious sway against his. His hand, no longer hesitant, found its way to her inner thigh, gently stroking the sensitive skin there, sending a jolt of pure pleasure through her. The soft denim of her jeans still clinging to her felt like an unbearable barrier. He seemed to sense her unspoken need. With a deep, resonant groan, he moved away just enough to allow them both to shed their remaining garments. The rustle of fabric on the floor was the only sound for a moment, besides the continued, though now softer, drumming of rain against the window pane. Then, skin met skin, the thrilling, electrifying contact of bare flesh against bare flesh. It was like coming home, a perfect fit, a return to a state of primal comfort and profound intimacy. He settled fully against her, his body a warm, comforting weight. His legs entwined with hers, a delicious friction that made her pulse quicken. His hand slid from her thigh, over her hip, and finally found the soft, yielding curve of her bottom, pulling her even closer, pressing her intimately against his hard desire. A gasp escaped her lips, a mixture of surprise and pure, unadulterated longing. She could feel his heart hammering against her chest, a powerful rhythm mirroring her own. "You are so beautiful," he murmured against her neck, his voice husky with desire, a low rumble that vibrated through her. "So incredibly beautiful." His words, simple yet profound, filled her with a warmth that spread from her heart to the tips of her toes. It wasn't just physical desire she heard in his voice, but a genuine admiration, a deep appreciation for her. She didn't reply, her voice caught in her throat, overwhelmed by the rush of emotion and sensation. Instead, she tightened her embrace, her legs wrapping around his, pulling him even closer, wanting to feel every inch of him against her. Her hands roamed freely now, exploring the taut muscles of his back, the firm curve of his buttocks, the strong line of his thighs. Every touch was a discovery, every caress a deepening of their connection. His kisses returned to her lips, more urgent now, more demanding, yet still infused with a tenderness that made her heart swell. Their mouths moved together in a passionate rhythm, tongues dancing, seeking, tasting. She tasted him, a clean, masculine taste, mingled with the sweetness of their shared desire. It was intoxicating, addictive, a flavor she knew she would crave for a long time to come. He shifted again, his body pressing more intimately against hers. A slow, deliberate movement that teased and tantalized. Her hips instinctively rose to meet his, a silent invitation, a primal dance that had no need for words. She felt the exquisite pressure, the promise of release building within her. A delicious tension that was almost unbearable, yet utterly thrilling. Every nerve ending in her body seemed to be alive, humming with anticipation, focused solely on him, on this moment. His hand slid between their bodies, a warm, knowing touch that found the core of her desire. He stroked and caressed, eliciting a soft whimper from her lips. Her hips arched higher, seeking the pressure, the delicious friction he was creating. The world outside, the storm, the very concept of time, faded away, replaced by a swirling vortex of sensation of him, of them. She was a creature of pure feeling, guided by instinct, by a deep, undeniable need for him. He leaned down, his lips finding her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "Look at me," he whispered, his voice a low, compelling rumble that sent shivers down her spine. She opened her eyes, hazy with desire, and met his gaze. His eyes, dark and intense, were filled with a raw passion, a profound tenderness that took her breath away. In that moment, she saw not just a lover, but a soulmate, a kindred spirit whose desires mirrored her own. With excruciating slowness, he began to bridge the final distance between them. Her breath hitched, a gasp caught in her throat as she felt the first exquisite press of him against her. It was a moment of perfect tension, of profound anticipation, a breathless pause before the inevitable. She gripped his shoulders, her nails digging lightly into his skin, an anchor in the swirling current of sensation. Then, with a deep, shuddering breath, he moved fully into her, a slow, deliberate claiming that was both powerful and infinitely tender. A soft moan escaped her lips, a sound of pure pleasure, of completion. Her body welcomed him, molded itself around him, as if they had always been meant to fit together this way. The warmth, the fullness, the exquisite pressure, it was everything she had imagined, and so much more. He paused, allowing her body to adjust, his eyes still locked with hers, searching for her comfort, her pleasure. "Are you with me?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She nodded, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, tears of joy, of overwhelming feeling. "Always," she managed to breathe, her voice barely audible. Then, he began to move. Slowly at first, a gentle rocking rhythm that deepened with each stroke. Her body responded instinctively, meeting his thrusts, her hips rising and falling in perfect synchronicity. The rhythm built, slowly, steadily, a powerful primal dance that consumed them both. Each movement was a wave of sensation, building higher and higher, carrying them further out into the ocean of their shared passion. She closed her eyes again, letting go, surrendering to the overwhelming tide. His hands were on her hips, guiding her, deepening the connection. His lips were on her neck, her shoulder, tasting her skin, drawing forth soft moans and gasps. The air in the room grew heavy with their shared desire, the scent of their bodies mingling, intoxicating and primal. The storm outside had almost completely subsided, replaced by a gentle, steady drip from the eaves, a quiet counterpoint to the rising crescendo within the room. Their breaths grew ragged, their heartbeats a frantic drum. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only the two of them, entwined, lost, in the intoxicating rhythm of their lovemaking. The pressure built, intense and exquisite, a coiled spring tightening with every thrust, every deep, powerful stroke. She could feel herself nearing the precipice, the edge of a breathtaking freefall. Her body began to tremble, a delicious weakness spreading through her limbs. She cried out his name, a raw, guttural sound of pure pleasure, as the first wave broke over her. It started as a deep tremor, originating from her core, spreading outwards like ripples in a pond. Then the tremors intensified, becoming powerful contractions, waves of exquisite sensation that washed over her, consuming her. She arched her back, her fingers clenching his shoulders, her body shuddering uncontrollably as she was flung over the edge, into the glorious, shattering release of orgasm. He groaned, a primal sound of triumph and surrender, his body tensing, pressing deeper into her as her climax consumed her. And then, with a final powerful thrust, he followed her, his own release a fierce, shuddering flood that cascaded through them both, binding them together in a shared moment of pure, unadulterated bliss. He collapsed onto her, his weight a comforting burden, his breath ragged against her ear. They lay there for a long time, entangled, breathless, the aftershocks of pleasure still rippling through their bodies. The silence in the room was profound, broken only by their heavy breathing and the gentle thrum of their hearts, slowly returning to a normal rhythm. The storm had passed, leaving behind a profound stillness, a sense of peace that permeated the air. He shifted slightly, lifting his head to gaze at her, his eyes soft with tenderness, a profound contentment etched on his face. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead, his touch as light as a butterfly's wing. A gentle smile played on his lips. "That was unforgettable," he murmured, his voice still husky. She smiled back, a contented, sleepy smile. "More than," she whispered, her voice equally soft, almost lost in the stillness. She nestled closer, feeling the comforting warmth of his skin against hers, the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. There was a sense of profound rightness, a feeling that this was exactly where she was meant to be, exactly who she was meant to be with. They drifted into a light, contented sleep, their bodies still intimately intertwined. The moonlight streamed through the window, painting silver stripes across their entangled limbs, a silent witness to the beautiful intimacy they had shared. She woke once in the middle of the night, not startled, but simply to the awareness of his steady breathing, the solid warmth of his arm draped possessively over her waist. She smiled into the darkness, a quiet joy bubbling in her chest, and drifted back to sleep. When she next opened her eyes, the room was bathed in the soft, pearly light of dawn. The storm had completely vanished, leaving behind a sky of ethereal gray, and the promise of a fresh, clean day. A gentle breeze, cool and invigorating, wafted through the slightly ajar window, carrying the scent of damp earth and renewed life. He was still asleep, his face relaxed and peaceful, his dark hair falling boyishly across his forehead. She watched him for a moment, a profound tenderness filling her. He looked even more handsome in the soft morning light, vulnerable and utterly captivating. She reached out a tentative hand, tracing the strong line of his jaw, then gently brushing the hair from his brow. He stirred, a soft groan escaping his lips, and his eyes fluttered open. For a moment, he looked disoriented. Then his gaze met hers, and a slow, beautiful smile spread across his face, lighting up his features. It was a smile of pure happiness, of recognition, of shared intimacy. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep, but infused with warmth. "Morning," she replied, her own voice husky. He tightened his arm around her, pulling her closer until her head was resting on his chest, and she could hear the steady rhythm of his heart. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. They lay there for a while, simply enjoying the quiet intimacy of the morning. The world outside was beginning to stir, but in their haven, time felt suspended. Eventually he stirred again, pressing a soft kiss to the top of her head. "I could stay like this forever," he whispered. "Me too," she confessed, meaning every word. But the needs of the day, gentle as they were, eventually called. They untangled themselves slowly, reluctantly, their movements still languid from the night's exertions. As she rose from the bed, he reached out, gently catching her hand, pulling her back for one last, lingering kiss. It was a kiss full of promise, of lingering warmth, of a desire that had not diminished, but deepened. They moved through the quiet house, gathering their clothes, a comfortable, unspoken understanding passing between them. The air was filled with a sense of calm contentment, a peaceful afterglow that permeated every corner of the room. He walked over to the window, pulling back the heavy curtains to reveal a world washed clean by the rain, sparkling under the gentle morning sun. A faint rainbow arched in the distance, a beautiful, unexpected gift. "Coffee?" she offered, her voice light, a small smile playing on her lips. He turned, his eyes still holding that deep, appreciative gaze. "Perfect," he said, and the way he said it, infused with such warmth and contentment, made her heart flutter anew. They sat at a small kitchen table, mugs steaming in their hands, the silence between them comfortable and easy. There was no need for forced conversation, no awkwardness, just a shared sense of peace and profound connection. He reached across the table, taking her hand, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. "Last night," he began, his voice soft, searching. She met his gaze, her own eyes reflecting the same depth of feeling. "Was everything," she finished for him, her voice barely a whisper. "And more." He squeezed her hand gently. "I don't think I've ever felt quite like that before." "Me neither," she admitted. The vulnerability in her voice was genuine, raw, reflecting the profound impact he had made on her. A comfortable silence settled between them again, filled with unspoken thoughts and burgeoning feelings. The faint scent of coffee mingled with the fresh air from outside, creating a comforting atmosphere. "I don't want this to be just one night," he said finally, his voice firm, his gaze steady and direct. "I want more, many more nights, many more mornings." Her heart swelled in her chest, a joyful ache. This was what she had hoped for, what she had secretly yearned for. She felt a lightness, a sense of hope that had been missing for too long. "I want that too," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "More than you know." He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. He rose from his chair, coming around the table to stand before her. He pulled her gently from her seat, wrapping his arms around her, holding her close. She leaned into him, feeling the familiar comfort of his embrace, the steady beat of his heart against her ear. "This is just the beginning," he whispered, his lips brushing her hair. She tilted her head back, looking up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. "The most beautiful beginning," she agreed, and then she rose on her tiptoes to kiss him. A soft, tender kiss that sealed their promise, a silent vow for all the unforgettable nights and blissful mornings that lay ahead. The storm had truly passed, leaving behind not just a clean world, but a newly woven story, full of passion, tenderness, and the enduring promise of a love that had only just begun to bloom. The quiet hum of the day outside, the soft glow of the morning sun, and the comforting weight of his arms around her, all conspired to keep her in this perfect suspended state of bliss, ready for whatever the rest of their unforgettable journey would bring.